when you are an African missionary, everything is faith. Like in terms of like, you know, there were times when we were starving out there. We would literally pray for our next meal as a group and just say, God, help us. So we would just basically go out there and we didn't have anything, and sometimes God would just give us.
Tell us one of those stories. Friends, welcome to another episode of Theology Applied. I'm here with my man, Raphael Mnkandhla. Brother, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I am so excited to be in this Barnes & Noble recording this podcast in public. Brother, first, if you don't mind, could you tell us how you came to faith, how you came to know Jesus?
So I came to faith, and this is, I'm close to 40 right now, so I was at the age of at least 16, 17 there. Turned 17, got to know the Lord. But really it was after just a lot of unfortunate events in my life in terms of, just to backtrack, the family I grew up in was, it was just an exciting, happy African home.
What country?
Zimbabwe. So I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, and so my mother at some point, and I think I remember this like early 90s, she just became ill. And this is the time when HIV testing centers are coming into Africa. And so people really don't know like what this disease is. And so just really watching her deteriorate. And I remember just like from probably the year 1990 all the way to 99, she died in 2000. Just watching just HIV just disintegrate her body to the point where I would say she really just was a living skeleton. So I remember just like a ton of times where where I would just walk over to the bed and just look at her, and it just really looked like there was no one in the bed but just a heartbeat. So it was just really excruciating just watching that. And in the meantime, like at that time, I was really wrestling in terms of faith-wise. Wrestling in this way, we had grown up going Seventh-day Adventist, and so all the stories of Jesus and just kind of hearing about who Jesus is, stories with, so we knew those stories, and at the same time found myself just also taking that time to also, every Christmas they would always play a Jesus movie on TV, and you would watch that. And I remember distinctly at the age of 12, probably watching like Jesus being crucified and just weeping, and just feeling like, and really just like feeling that conviction, but really just not knowing what I was doing. But I remember just saying, I'm going to serve you for the rest of my life. But
so you think you weren't even born again? But Jesus on the cross resonated with you to the point where you wanted to serve God.
So I know that there was some really just lingering, just like what I would say, the drawing towards, and towards God. But then I'm stuck within this system that's like, you have to keep the Sabbath, you have to do
kind of works.
So you've got to work for, you've got to be a good person, kind of, in order for you to be accepted and know, and know God. And so fast forward, when my mother finally passes away, I find myself just really just like suicidal.
How old were you,
and
roughly? Part
of that, like that's when I'm 16, going into 17. She passed away like I think she passed away February 28. It was a leap year for some reason. February 29, a leap year. And so I found myself just really like, because of an African household, your mom is everything. There's a reason why we say Africa is Mama Africa. So the African mom is very pivotal. Part of that is simply because the fathers go to work a lot, and then so you're really close to your
Sure.
mom. And my father was also, he had fought in the army. He had been a prisoner of war.
Wow.
So just very hard man. So we were very close to our mom. So by that time, I just found myself just so disoriented, like trying to take my life at every course of time, drinking my pain and sorrow, you know, waking up with tattoos that I just didn't even know.
Oh, man.
And I remember distinctly a time when, so my sister ended up running away because we were all grieving. My sister left and went to South Africa to try to, like, at least take care of us, take us through school. And I remember right when I was about to also go, which is a very perilous kind of like journey when you're being smuggled across the border to
sure.
go. And the day before I did that, I went to go visit one of my aunts, and that aunt actually called my other aunt as well. And that aunt, that aunt came and asked me to come and live with her, and live with her son, because she lived remotely somewhere else, and so she wanted someone who was going to take care of her house and live with her son. And
this
so
in South Africa?
So this is in Zimbabwe still. So this is the night before I leave to go to South Africa, and God knows what I was going to get into there. That night before, two aunts basically get together and they say, you need to get this young man out of this house, out of his father's house, so that and so I end up going and living with my cousin. And my cousin basically, like, just, I'm walking in, and this is like, I'm walking in broken, man. So I'm listening to every, Eminem is like helping me fleshing out the pain.
A lot of negative emotion there.
A lot of negative emotion, but
and anger.
I was finding just expression there.
I feel you.
Wu-Tang Clan, just like, and I was listening to Tupac stuff, all that stuff. So I would show up and I would live with this cousin, and I'd show up drunk and try to go brush my teeth, try to kind of get all that stuff out and stuff. But I'm watching this man living his life. He's a believer. He's a worship leader, in fact,
How old is
at
he?
his church, and he's probably 22, 23.
Okay, he's a little older than you.
Yeah, a little older than me. Just sweetheart, like, in terms of, like, has a sweet spirit within him. Just looks very unbothered, unaffected by, he's going through life and all that, to the point that it drives me just like, I'm mad at why he looks so peaceful. And so we just live life. I'm watching him spend time with Jesus, watching him, like, really just like Sunday morning, waking up, going, leaves me sleeping, kind of just, we're not talking much about faith stuff. He's playing worship music in the house. And I'm listening to your Ron Kenolis now and all that stuff, like gospel music and, Keith Greens and like, so eventually we sit down on the couch and I was just like, man, what is up with you? And he asked me about my story. I tell him stuff. And so eventually, like, as I'm telling him my story, just unending suffering that I had witnessed, and just he says something that just totally flipped my whole world. And he says, Raphael, I don't know what you feel and what you've gone through and all those things, but I know someone who has suffered even way beyond. And this is Jesus, and presents Jesus in the gospel. So for me, the suffering Savior, the powerful being, God of the universe, coming and suffering, and then extending grace towards me, and forgiveness, but not only just forgiveness, healing. Man, that flipped my whole world upside down. So I remember just us sitting there, and I'm just weeping, and I'm feeling like this sense of right when he's saying, do you want to receive Jesus? And I said yes. And just the flood of peace.
Wow.
And just new birth. Like, and I just remember, like, I'd known about Jesus, but I had not known him like the way that day I got to know him.
How did he share the gospel with you in a way that you hadn't heard it before in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Like, what was his? Was it pray the sinner's prayer? Was it Jesus died on the cross as a substitute? You need to receive him. How did he?
So Jesus dying as a substitute, but not only just him as the substitute, but him being able to be that high priest who sympathizes with our weaknesses. Meaning that, like, because this is what I was sick of at that time. Someone saying, I know how you feel. But he just came straight out, right? And he's like, I have no context of actually trying to process through your pain. And I don't have to try to figure that out. But I know one that has gone to the depths. Like, who's coming from on high has the power to save you, but who's gone to the depths, and he is this, like, for me later on it was finding that language of like this high priest who has been tempted in every way. Because at that time also, so, you know, because I was experiencing pain and suffering and all that, my suffering had started acting out in many sinful ways.
Rebellious activity.
That just basically, like, where I didn't even think there was a way out of that. Disrespectful towards my father, disrespectful towards people, like disrespectful towards myself. Just really, like, just a lot of things that even just basically, like, even just some drug activity that I just really had no business getting into. But part of that I was trying to bury the pain, and part of that was trying to also find almost like acceptance in other places to belong.
Community around drugs, alcohol, partying.
Like, because that's like trying to work out that pain and trying to find people that were your so-called gang.
Community, basically.
So for me, what really he was bringing towards me was just this person, like, that's why even now, like, I'm drawn so much towards Isaiah 40, Psalm 23, the Lord, sovereign high, is my shepherd, choosing a menial task, like, just like of just like that particular love. So for me, it was like basically a John 3:16, who God is. I think that's what he did very well. Who God is, the maker of the universe. But like, what has he done? He has come down and he has died for you. But like, and he has suffered on your behalf. And so therefore he understands, so he can heal your pain. But at the same time, he also now not only just, he can adopt you. So from now onwards, two scriptures that he kind of just really drilled into my heart from that, like, though father or mother forsake you, he'll take you in, Psalm 27. And that for me was like, because I was just feeling like an orphan. And at that time, like, my father, who was an army commander, like, just
hard man,
very hard man, very. So he was like, it's either you shape up or you're
out.
You're out. And so at that point, I'm rebellious against my dad. I'm feeling like an orphan, and that's where, at least, like, I would say, like, my Seventh-day Adventist kind of background was kind of was creeping in a little bit, in terms of just, I knew there was a God to pray to. So I would pray a ton during that time, before that. But at the same time, I'm coming from, we are, Zimbabwe, we are ancestral worshippers. So, but like, that's like, so I would say that, like, I also believed in, deeply entrenched in, this was syncretism, kind of like a mixture between Christianity
and
traditional
worship.
stuff, right? So I'm still going to my mother's grave and talking. And part of that is because I feel like I've been so wronged even by my dad. I was just angry with him simply because like a stepmother had just moved in like right after my mother had died. So I just felt like he just didn't care. Replaced her very quickly. But at the same time, HIV/AIDS is a sexual transmitted disease. We kind of just like felt he was responsible because, you know, because of promiscuity stuff. And at the same time, like because of my rebellion, he was refusing to pay my school fees. So part of that, it was like, I felt like I was in between the rock and the hard place, like just where there's no future for me. I can't go to school. Like, and so therefore, I just felt like there was no one for me at that time. That's why I was driven towards suicide.
It's like there was no hope in the future.
There was no hope, no future whatsoever. Like, because for the African child, school is everything.
Yeah.
But unlike here, you know, education here, everyone.
It's taken for granted.
Yeah, you can go to school and school is free.
Yeah.
For us, you didn't go to school if you didn't get to pay. So even going and staying with my aunt, the promise was that she was going to take me to school. So then I thought there was a glimpse of a future there. But then at that house, just getting to hear, you don't have to have life figured out. There's one who's willing to take you in.
Love that.
You know, Isaiah 40, for me, it was just so much of like, how can you say, Jacob, that God doesn't care for you, that your case is not heard before him? And that for me, that he's taking me in, that he, you know, can a mother forsake her child at birth, even though she can, I will not. And that for me, probably like I would say even what I value now is the theology of adoption.
Love that.
More than anything. Just the whole idea that he was taking me in. And then from there, obviously, life, you know, that day when I got to know Jesus, like it was like something happened. But the next day, man, like I remember walking out. It was almost like nature took a new turn. Like I remember that day, like I was looking at trees in a different way. I was feeling like I'm breathing a new air. I'm feeling like, and I feel like subsequently, like right there was like that wake up call from when I was weeping before just the TV screen at 12. It was like, I just sense like, and I describe it this way. Man, like how many more people are thirsty for this kind of refreshment? Like
Living
this
water.
is my first couple of weeks when I was saved. I was just like, how many more people? And I remember just getting this picture of like, man, I want to take this living water and run back into the desert. Like I thought I knew who Jesus was, but now I know. And now I'm willing to let go even of my ancestry worship, my everything. It was like all chips in. And from that moment onwards, that's when I felt like I just had almost like a sense of the call right when I got saved. And
Call to ministry?
Yeah, call to ministry, because from that moment onwards, I remember my father looking for me, trying to get me to go into the army. Because for him, this was the only way, like, so you went and signed me up for to go into the Zimbabwean army. And once again, I was like, Dad, I found what I want to do. But he was like, and I remember him sitting me down and saying, I used to be like you.
Oh, man.
And he recited Isaiah 61, and he recited a whole bunch of scriptures, and he told me, he was like, it'll wear off. Like, I used to be like you, it'll wear off, and this is just like, and you need to get into what's gonna this is what's gonna be your future here.
Something solid, basically.
Something solid.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, no, Dad, and once again, that caused a rift again, because I'm also forsaking heritage-wise. He's a proud Army guy. So I remember after that, just going and getting into a local church, getting baptized, volunteering.
Is this your cousin's church?
Cousin's church, and he's and for me, I just he just discipled me.
Love it. How did he do that?
Part of that, obviously, just saying, hey, after this, here's a Bible, and this is what it looks like to study the Bible, and just walking me through that, taking me to church. And I remember walking into church, and part of and I think what I ended up doing there was when the call of salvation came again at the church, I went straight in there. I was just man, I wanted to be all in. And then I remember being taken into a counseling room. There was almost 10 people that had just given their lives to Christ on that day. And this guy just basically just sharing with me what does coming to Jesus look like. Deny yourself, deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow him. They gave me a little booklet of what does new life in Christ look like. And I remember the next 30 to 60 days, I ate that thing up next to my Bible, just going into that thing and just if any man is in Christ, is a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. Embracing all that. And then I remember the next study, because I jumped into a youth group, and that youth group was doing a study on Exodus. And so Exodus, the themes of Exodus for me, coming out of Pharaoh's grip and going in towards the promised land, and just sensing this is what he has done in Jesus for me. And so just really having just a lot of, at home, having a cousin who just knew the Lord, really was demonstrating to me even what it looks like to live for Christ on a day-to-day basis. And then at the church, meeting these other teenagers that were on fire for Jesus, leaders that were willing to walk with me through my rough edges as well. Because at that time, I remember one of my youth leaders wrote to me a couple of years back, and he's like, bro, when you came to church, you were rough. You couldn't walk away from a fight. You were just you were raw, and you were just and he's just seeing what has happened up to now, this is just, and so they were patient with me, walked me through that stuff. And so I remember asking myself, what does it look like to serve God? So I just plugged in the church, but then there was also another organization called Scripture Union, which is an evangelism kind of group. It's almost like your FCA, Young Life here.
Fellowship, Christian athletes.
Yeah. Yep. And so one of my friends from church told me that they were taking volunteers into that, and they would give you a stipend. And so we would go into schools, do assemblies, establish Bible studies in schools, and do camps and do all that stuff. And so that's what I ended up doing for a couple of years. And while I was taking my stipend and paying for my what we call advanced level of school.
So it's beyond high school or not?
Yeah, so beyond high school, because you've got ordinary level and advanced level. So I was just paying for myself for that, trying to actually finally just pay for that. And because I knew that I wanted to pursue even further education.
So what are you, about 18 now?
Yeah, so I'm around 18, going to 19, just working through all that. So I ended up actually getting done with my advanced level, but stayed at Scripture Union. And then after that, but then I just kept burning out. Like he was just like
doing too much or what?
Just so much zeal. But at the same time, like I'm just still a wild young man. So I'd work at Scripture Union, worked with another organization called Family Impact.
Okay.
Just saw Christ transform a lot of young people, but at the same time, I just knew I needed more discipleship. So I ended up going back to my local church. And so I worked at the office there.
You're talking about the church that first discipled you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I ended up going back there, told them I still feel called to ministry. Yeah. Made me clean toilets.
Nice. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you're going to serve first.
Yeah.
You're going to go to the nursery. You're going to clean some toilets.
And it was there, man. Like I did everything in that church, man. Like, loved actually sitting in those staff meetings, watching my senior pastor. This was like an international church in terms of like white Zimbabwean pastor. We had an American pastor. We had an Indian guy. Wow. And we had a guy from the UK, and we had a couple of guys
now,
from Zimbabwe.
Now, is that because of the close proximity to South Africa? Is that why?
Yes, okay. Yes. Because at one point, we were just, South Africa and Zimbabwe really just were very, the borders were open.
Gotcha.
So we were all the British colony and stuff. So, yeah, so because of that, because of being a British colony, it was an easier place to reach for any English-speaking person. So, yeah, so at that church, really got to learn quite a lot. I think I worked in children's ministry, sang in the choir, played in the worship team, helped feed the homeless, preached to the homeless, was answered phones at the church, ran a bookstore downstairs, like.
Did it all.
Everything.
Sound like a church planner.
Yeah, it just, which was good because like I was kind of really thinking about like I went into almost every space in the church, did missions. Our church had, I think even up to now, like we have probably 50 plus church plants all over the country.
Wow.
So I would travel.
That church that you came from, 50 church plants.
Yeah.
How big was this church?
Rural. At that time, like we're probably like a couple of thousand, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so this is a big church.
Yeah.
A couple thousand?
Yeah, I guess.
That's big.
But in Africa, there's some churches that are like really, really big, So we've got churches all over the city, and so we would just go everywhere. And so because of that, man, I found myself still wanting to do more, like in terms of like just heart development. So I remember sitting in some of the Bible school classes there at the church.
These more advanced classes, or like just Sunday school, quote unquote?
Almost close Sunday school, because like we would get like some recorded Bible school classes from here in the States, and we would watch and we would do that, and then out of that, I went and got into YWAM.
YWAM?
Yeah, okay. Youth with a Mission. So my church sent me into Youth with a Mission because I needed a lot more discipleship. So their discipleship training school is rigorous, right? Because I just had this mission addiction that was there, and I just always wanted, like, I want to do more for Jesus, So
Did that take you out of Zimbabwe?
Yes.
Okay.
So that took me out of Zimbabwe, put me with YWAM, because you go and you do your discipleship training school, which is like, so there's 12 weeks of lectures, from the fatherhood of God, the Son, the Holy Spirit, just all so discipleship, doctrinally training you. Yeah. But then after that, you go into the outreach phase. And the outreach phase, usually they would put you in the country, somewhere in the country. Like they would take us, we lived at least for at least a month or two in some remote Zimbabwean village. And you would do just contact work, go you stayed in one place, you would, cook with the fire. I'm a city boy.
Yeah.
So
you weren't used to rural life.
Yeah, just yes and no, but like it was just like you're immersed in that. You're reaching people, you're preaching the gospel, you're tied onto a local church out there, and and then you would go and you would leave. So the first time I lived in Botswana.
Okay.
In Botswana, stayed for more than a month. Tough seasons.
Why?
Because tough seasons because when you are an African missionary, everything is faith. Like in terms of there were times when we were starving out there. We would literally pray for our next meal as a group and just say, God, help us. So we would just basically go out there and we didn't have anything, and sometimes God would just give us.
Tell us one of those stories.
I remember we were in Botswana and we ran out of money, and we were in a city called Selebi Pikwe. We ran out of money and we would fast and pray, ask God to provide, and I remember someone coming in and just saying, guys, we just want to bless you with this. That's why I love stories by George Muller and stuff, because there's a lot of things that resonate.
The bread truck breaks down in front of the orphanage.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But it was cherishing, someone, for example, saying, hey, I butchered a cow and I'm giving you guys this cow head.
There's a meal or two or three.
Bro, taking that cow head, taking that and obviously cooking, making sure you scrape all that stuff and you come out of there with just a few meals out of that, and I remember also and then I turned around and became a discipleship training school leader with YWAM. I was now on staff with them.
Nice.
And I remember us going to Mozambique.
Okay.
And even there, there were a ton of times when we would run out of money and we would just pray. And randomly someone would come and give you stuff. And you would eat whatever would come. In Mozambique, we're in Beira, so it was right next to the Indian Ocean. Okay. And so sometimes fishermen would come and they would give you fresh fish from the ocean.
That's
and
probably
just
gold, huh? If you're hungry.
Straight up. So it was a very trying time, but yet at the same time, there were some times for example, you would walk. There was one time I remember Christmas New Year 2004 into 5, we walked from one rural place to the city because nobody came to pick us up and we didn't have money to go, and we walked probably almost a good 40 miles to get to the next city, and we got there just totally trashed.
I'll bet.
But man, Jesus was close. But it is times where still at that time you still just say, man, I just want to give my life to Jesus. So
that is really and quite literally walking by faith. You are trusting Jesus for the next meal, for the next little bit of resource so you can keep the mission.
Yeah. One of the hardest times for me probably would have been, while I was in YWAM, my sister got sick. My sister was 24. She had left and gone to South Africa. And she got 3 strokes. So it turned out she also had HIV/AIDS. So I basically, my 24-year-old sister, got to see her disintegrate to become just a living skeleton. The same kind of thing as I saw with my mother. And I was right before, so I was in YWAM at that time, and I remember taking time off, and one of my friends had some way of actually getting to South Africa, so I had to get smuggled across. Man, for family, I was just like, my sister had gotten she was in the hospital, just struggling. So got smuggled across, went to South Africa, Pretoria, where Honest Church is actually.
That's a large city.
Yes. Yeah. Even now when I walk into Pretoria, sometimes I'm like, the last time I was here was when I was illegal. Was able to take her, took her back home, to Zimbabwe, and even during that time I was in YWAM, because YWAM you're raising support.
Right.
You're raising support, but yet at the same time I just knew God wasn't calling me to quit doing that. And I remember, this is now like just watching God provide. I'd be at YWAM and I'd wake up from the base and go to the hospital. In Zimbabwe at that time, the inflation was just insane. So even in the hospitals, you would have to buy food to feed your loved ones. And so I would actually make food, go at 5 in the morning at the hospital, go help her take a shower and do all that stuff. And I remember just like asking the Lord God, you've called me, are you gonna provide? At the same time, I don't want to neglect my sister. Right. She's done a lot in taking care of me and my young brother. And I remember going, there was one day, one of our pastors asked me to come and help train. We were training children's church teachers, like at another church. I walked into that church, helped train and all that stuff. And the pastor just, for some reason, just called me aside and he said, tell me about yourself. And I told him, I'm in YWAM, this is what I'm doing. And he was like, so do you have any need right now that you're praying for? And I remember telling him, my sister is at the hospital. I really would love to be able to take care of her and do all that stuff. He pulled out what probably was enough money for me to be able to get her enough, probably 2 or 3 weeks of food.
Wow.
And I remember just weeping. Once again, that whole idea of just I've got you. I'm your father, I've got you. And I remember just realizing, okay, when God calls you on a mission, he also provides. And I remember also just right before I had to leave for my mission trip to go to Mozambique with YWAM to stay there for a couple of months, was when my sister passed. And when she passed, I had a burden of taking care of my young brother, taking him through school, and at the same time he was going to university. At the same time, taking care of my sister's funeral expenses and all that. It was tough. And the week before, there was a friend of mine who had come to visit from the States. I had met him through Scripture Union. And right before he left, he just kind of slipped some money onto my pocket. And he was just like, you're gonna need this. And at first, I just took that, kept it. And I was just kind of blown away because it was enough for me to pay for my young brother's school fees. And then, but yet, my sister passes away, I'm able to get the coffin and able to buy. In Africa, our funerals are elaborate, in terms
kind of
of
a wedding.
Yeah, so people gather every single day until you bury that person. And so you have to be buying food to feed everyone, the mourners who are coming. And just watching God provide for that kind of stuff. But I think my sister propelled me more towards ministry, because right before she passed, we sat down and I shared the gospel with her. And seeing the gospel transform a living skeleton, and seeing her, there was a sweet moment when we would walk into that room And I would look at my sister, I'd be weeping. She would have this life in her eyes. And she'd be comforting us, telling us, hey, I have Jesus. I know. And just watching the peace.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's actually like where Psalm 16 came alive. So Psalm 16:11. You make known to me the pathway to life. In your presence there's fullness of joy. Watching probably like this body, you know, HIV always ends up with the final blow is usually one big disease that comes in. So for my mother it was syphilis, my sister it was meningitis. Where she would be saying, hey, my brain feels like it's in a can.
Oh, wow.
Like it just, and she is screaming, there's excruciating pain, but yet every now and then you would see she would still have that joy. The joy of the Lord was her strength. And even to the moment when we, on the day when, because like in the hospitals there was no medicine. So we took her to the hospital. They couldn't treat her because we couldn't afford medicine. So I go and I pray and I ask God to provide. And someone finally, I found some money to be able to buy medicine for her. And on the day when I could afford the medicine is when she passed. But then obviously like, at that time, obviously like you're also seeing the whole idea, money is not your salvation. Like this is not. Where is the true joy? Where is all that? It's in Jesus. And so I say that like the first death tried to take me out, but the second death in my family propelled me more into ministry. Because after that, I remember just saying, if this is the kind of hope that Jesus gives, this is what I want to, it gives me even a greater cause to running into that desert boldly. And so that's actually now like where I'm in Mozambique. And I remember just like weeping in front of the Indian Ocean on every single morning, battling grief. But also with my guitar, worshiping the Lord, pressing into the Lord. And at that time, I remember that's when I resolved I need to go to Bible school. I need to go get trained more. If this is it right here, I need to go trained more. That's when I applied to Bible school in the States. So I leave Mozambique specifically to come back to Zimbabwe to go, and I've been accepted at a school, little Bible school called Christ for the Nations in Dallas.
Love it.
Where I met my wife. And so, you know, it's got its own turmoil in terms of like how God provides through that. Because I applied in 2007 when I left Zimbabwe. Inflation is probably around 25,000%. You can't afford anything. You can't afford anything. I'm a laughing stock in front of everyone because I've got this weird dream. I want to go to the States to go to Bible school. So I apply, they accept me. I'm accepted. I've got a partial scholarship, but then I don't have all the other, I don't have money to travel. I don't have guarantee. I've got, you know, school fees and all that stuff. And I still have just this one promise. If he adopted you, he'll take care of you. You know, he who did not spare his own son, how will he not graciously give you all things? Like, which is, once again, just the gospel of adoption for me. Adoption became like I was rooted in that. And that's when I remember someone applying, and some of my friends in YWAM, some of them are helping raise like some money. Like there's a YWAM friend of mine who is in Germany. Asked like a non-believer friend, hey, I have a friend who wants to go to school, this is what they want to do. and just kind of sharing the story. And this friend of hers, basically an unbeliever, says, "Hey, I've got free air miles.
Wow.
I can give him a ticket."
Get you to Dallas.
So I had a ticket to go to Dallas, and all of a sudden, like, and I'm talking about, like, I've got lots of friends, just money's coming from different places, and yeah, so I end up in Dallas, go to school, and that same year when I come there, I meet, you know, that after almost like a year, that's when, like, you know, I've met my wife, and you know, we become serious. I go and serve at a church, yeah, and live from there. Go and did my bachelor's, did my master's, and just really kept being curious. And there was just a lot of things I was trying to, theologically, I really wanted to understand, nail down, especially like just the theology of suffering, you know, just the sovereignty of God, and you know, and what's happening here on earth. And so that's really what ended up like launching me into Reformed theology. Yeah, so
that's a great that's a great place to pause, and we'll pick up with part 2 from there. You're discovering Reformed theology and giving a call to ministry and church planting.
Yeah.
All right, great.